Have you ever wanted to be a host on an ACA show or be the one calling the shots behind the scenes? Are you in Austin, Texas, or at least Austin adjacent? Well, on Saturday, February 25th, make your way down to the Freethought library because we'll be holding open auditions for show hosts and orientations for prospective crew members. For those wanting to be hosts, you'll be able to sit in the studio where our shows are broadcast and we'll put you through your paces to see if you can be one of the new personalities of the ACA. For future crew members, you'll get hands-on experience using the equipment used for broadcast and will help us record the host auditions. If you've ever dreamed of being part of the ACA productions, then this is your chance to show us what you've got. This event is free. For more information and registration, visit tiny.cc/ACA auditions.
So you think that you can tell us how to live our lives, never questioning the source from which your moral code derives. You think that suffering is part of some great plan that's been devised. I wonder what will it take for you to start opening your eyes. I wonder.
Hello and welcome to the Atheist Experience. Today is January 29th, 2023. I'm your host, Jim Barrows, and joining me today is Jaime Boone.
What's up?
So it's been a hot
An
minute.
empty sky.
It's been a hot minute since you've been on here, so it's been going
It's
new.
been a very hot, a very steamy, a very Texas minute since then.
Yeah.
You know, the minute of talking that I would do, have given a minute, it's been about that amount of time, so at least a month. Yeah, I mean, things are still going strong with me, personally, job, life, relationship, moving. Still an atheist.
Okay. Still haven't run into any good arguments or evidence, huh?
Nope. No. Although I do this thing anytime that I'm on a show where at least, for the 24 hours beforehand, at some point, I stop and I do find some space and I just go like, okay, if there is a God that's going to reveal himself to me, now would be a great time. And I did that. And so, nothing. So I'm still
yet.
here.
No ghosts popping out. No.
Nope.
Okay.
No divine inspiration struck. So if he doesn't want me as a friend, he'll have me as an enemy, or doesn't interfere.
Alrighty.
I gave you a chance, bro. You could have had me on your team.
Yeah, could have.
I feel like I'm talking to the because I went to a Catholic high school, and I realized that I'd never told this story on the air before. And it's one of the ones that I look back and I go, man, if they had just been that much more oh no, hey, come to lunch with us. And actually tried to, I would be Catholic, probably. Would have been Catholic and no, here it is. I've memorized the catechism because I'm a nerd. I've learned Latin so I can understand the Vatican rules in their original, but they ditched me at lunch and left me cleaning a place, so I didn't go back.
I wouldn't have.
Basically what happened, yeah. So thank an empty sky or whoever for lackluster outreach to teenagers in high school. Otherwise, yeah, I would have done that instead of D&D.
Yeah. D&D's a better time anyway.
Yeah, more dice.
Yeah. This is the Atheist Experience. We're a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. And we are live in the studio today. We've got a live studio audience. We'll get shots of them later. So we'll be having lots of fun. You ready to take this first call?
Sock it to me.
There will be no violence on the show today.
I'll test him, but I don't think we'll get there.
Let's hope not. All righty. We're going to take Omar in California, who's wondering what atheism and science have to say about each other. How you doing, Omar?
I'm doing good. How you guys doing?
Well, it's a Sunday. We're here on the show, and we're hoping someone can prove God to us. But do you want to talk about what atheism and science have to say about each other? So is that correct?
Yeah, somewhat. somewhat. I guess I want to take you through my kind of reasoning and rationality, and I'm just curious to maybe what your guys' opinion is on that.
Okay.
So I just have your reason and rationality that they say what about each other, or just like what your thoughts on the topic are. Because our notes don't have the conclusion of what you believe. I didn't know if you were leaning on that.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. What's that?
Oh, never mind. Tell us what you believe. And
yeah,
why.
just go ahead and tell us what you think.
Okay, yeah. So, I know that, there seems to be this kind of thing between science and God, and, something about this idea that science points us away from God. But, I don't know how much true, at least the way I see things, it's not necessarily like that. See, the way I understand things is kind of based on the conservation of energy regarding, energy being created and destroyed. If we accept this scientific law as a fact, doesn't this basically tell us that nature cannot create itself? Because if this is a law of nature, this is the law of nature.
So you're missing an incredibly important point on Newton's second law. And do you know what that is? Can you cite Newton's second law, which is kind of what you're alluding to here?
Mm-hmm.
For the folks at home,
what is,
Yeah. Because the important point that you're missing is in an isolated system, right? Energy will turn to chaos in an isolated system. The problem is that the universe may be an isolated system, and we do see evidence of that. But Earth, this planet, and every other planet is not an isolated system. We're getting energy from the sun. We radiate energy out, right? And so we're not locally on this planet. We're not isolated. So we're getting energy in and out. So that's the problem. And when you're looking at a scientific law, keep in mind that scientists are incredibly parsimonious with their words, and usually very, very sharp, especially when they're detailing theory and laws and things like that. So you can't just forget in an isolated system and think it works, because it doesn't. It's a really, really important point.
Additionally, I'd say when you're talking about the origins of our cosmos, going back to the Big Bang, the law of thermodynamics isn't an attempt by physicists to explain what the nature of existence, whatever that word would mean, at a time before the Big Bang, whatever before would mean before the creation of time, or existence would mean before matter. There's a reason why scientists are very parsimonious with their language. But yeah, so that describes our universe as it is now, but the point before that, we haven't tried, or I certainly haven't tried to describe in scientific terms, and neither have cosmologists.
Sure. So, I mean, I would say, given all of mankind's observations of the universe around them, it would fall in line with this idea of the conservation of energy, would it not? I know you maybe mentioned it in the context of a thermodynamic law, but, I don't necessarily want to stick to that just for the reason of, I don't know what other potential, you could say, baggage comes with that. I'm kind of basing it more on like how I see things,
Right. There's how you see things, and then there's what science can actually explain and demonstrate, right?
So, well, you mentioned science mentioning a closed system, and now I'm
isolated, not closed, but yeah.
Or isolated system, sorry. I'm using the word universe in a somewhat generic sense. I'm using it in a all-encompassing type of manner. That's to say, the universe is just like all, you could say, energy.
Yeah, and I
understand it within time and space.
Yeah, and if you're listening, I actually admitted that the universe may, in fact, be doing that, and we see evidence for that at the universal scale. The problem is that we live on this planet, and this planet is not an isolated system. We get energy in from the sun. We radiate energy out, right? And the other planets do the same thing. We get energy, not nearly as abundant as other planets, but as we do from the sun. But we also get energy, so we're not an isolated system. And that's really an important point to understand. And that's why we have life and other things coming into existence here, is because energy is coming in to the system called planet Earth.
Mm-hmm. So everything you mentioned, would that not be part of the system called the universe?
Well, so again, you're kind of missing the point. There's the universe, which we talked about, but within the universe are isolated little pieces, right? Nothing happens at the same time all around everywhere, right? If you were to heat up water, water doesn't necessarily always heat up or cool down exactly the same way on the smaller scale. And that's what we have with the universe, right? And at one point it did, and then it started to cool down enough that we were actually able to start getting matter and things like that. But within each individual element and in different parts of the universe, you get different amounts of energy because nothing is perfectly equal across everything. And we see that in cosmic microwave background radiation and a number of other places as well. But just because it happens at a universal scale doesn't mean that individual elements within that universe are all heating up, cooling down at the same rate, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So my question
Okay,
is, what can your observations about matter tell us about science and atheism? Because the notes we have are what science and atheism say about each other. And so far we've talked about thermodynamics and closed and open systems, but I'm wondering how that relates to the religious or non-religious element here.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily bring up religion and non-religion because that starts bringing in lots of beliefs, whereas at least in my worldview, theism and atheism is very different. At least the way I understand things, it doesn't seem to require beliefs, whereas religion does. So I kind of rather make that distinction.
Yeah, they're different. I mean, basically what I'm getting to, I'm trying not to say, oh, okay, so what's your point? Because that sounds dismissive, but I was going to say, oh, okay, what's the next point in your point?
Well, yeah. So
what's your point?
The next point I was going to make, kind of based on the law and conservation of energy, the point I would make off that is this law essentially tells us that nature cannot create itself. It's not possible to be both self-creating and follow the law of conservation of energy.
Right. And
when you say nature in that sentence, are you referring to our observable cosmos or the universe?
I'm referring to that, yes.
So this is a little bit, I think that this argument is a little bit analogous to evolution can't explain abiogenesis. Yes, because it doesn't try to. So the second law of thermodynamics describes things that happen in the universe now that it exists and what we observe. And what we observe and our, various observations and the theories of relativity is that in the universe, matter isn't created or destroyed. There's matter and energy have this relationship and all of this, but that doesn't tell us about the creation of the universe, or at least I've never heard anyone claim that it does.
Well, I would say the one thing it does tell us about creation is that nature cannot create itself.
No,
outside of that,
it doesn't say anything about the beginning of nature. It just says it's a bit like saying if I only see a plant grow when sunlight strikes it, then it couldn't have come from a seed. Well, the part where it's a seed, the part before the observable universe, we can't observe, so we don't know.
Right. And this only sounds. I think part of the problem here is that you don't understand what the laws of thermodynamics are, the first, second, and third law, and how they apply, right? Because they don't say anything they don't say anything of the kind about the creation of the universe. They only talk about energy and therefore matter. Yeah. But if you, you have to go back and read them, and you have to read every word, and you have to understand what that means. The universe can be isolated, yes, but within the universe there are systems that are following the laws of thermodynamics at different rates in different ways, right? Because that's where the sun comes in, right? The sun produces energy, and that energy comes in and strikes chemicals and chemicals do stuff. Water heats up, water cools down when they're facing away. You have all of this stuff happening that doesn't exactly follow the laws of thermodynamics locally. And by locally, I mean the entire planet. And so, yeah, you have different levels of energy. And the planet has blocked energy at different points depending on how much CO2 is in the air or not CO2, how much ash is in the air if a super volcano exploded. This planet has different levels of oxygen at different times, which has caused things like a single lightning strike to cause a flash fire over, thousands of acres, things like that. And so, yeah, as a general rule, this is true, but only in an isolated system. And this planet is not isolated. So when you try and apply the law of thermodynamics to this planet, it doesn't work because it's not isolated. It's only isolated in the universe that we exist in, and that is only as far as we're able to determine so far, right? There are some physicists that look at white holes and say, yeah, somewhere there's a white hole that's bringing energy into the universe, and that would mean we are no longer isolated. But that is still very hypothetical at this point because we haven't actually discovered one. So there are some things we got to look at, but in general, I don't think you understand the laws of thermodynamics well enough to come to that conclusion.
Well, that could very well be true. It's not like I have formal education on it. But I would say, you did mention how laws of thermodynamics kind of work a little bit differently, but I didn't hear necessarily anything that would invalidate the law of conservation of energy or to lead me to believe that, hey, this could be invalid in some instance.
I'm not saying it's invalid. I'm saying that locally we don't follow it because we have energy input into the system we call Earth. The Earth is not isolated.
I understand. I guess then, it could be a semantic thing, but at least the way I understand the universe, it is like an all-encompassing, like by definition, it is isolated because
yes, and I've agreed with that. The universe is isolated, but within the universe, not everything happens at the same rate. And so you have this local star system. The sun was created by, matter coming together under the force of gravity and coming into fusion, starting fusion, right? That's a local system. And so all this stuff happens at different rates. So that's what you have to look at is you could look at the entire universe and go, yeah, in billions, trillions of years, whatever it's going to take, according to several hypotheses, matter will keep expanding out until finally there is really no matter at some point, and that would be the law of thermodynamics happening. But today, right now, for the last several billion years, energy that's been happening at different rates in different places. And right now on Earth, we've got a lot of energy coming in, so we just don't see that here on Earth. Right? So you've got to adjust your scale sometimes.
Well, I understand the point you're making. If I was talking about maybe the creation of the Earth, then I would understand why outside systems affecting the Earth would kind of render that law of thermodynamics as invalid in this case. But I'm not necessarily understanding why we can't apply it to the universe as a whole.
Well, so
when I say a reason to apply it to the universe as a whole.
Well, when I say we do apply it to the universe as a whole and we do see it happening, what does that mean to you?
So that means to me that, like the law of nature states that energy can only convert forms. It can't be created nor destroyed.
I agree with that. Right.
And
so we're in agreement on that point, right? We're in agreement that the law of thermodynamics apply to the universe as far as we're able to determine right now. We're in agreement on that.
We're in agreement about that. And then I guess I take it a step further by kind of saying, well, if that is the case, then that means it is not possible for nature to have created itself.
So when you say nature has created itself, what are you talking about? Creation of the universe?
Yeah, just the creation of.
Okay, so you know that the current leading theories that I'm aware of, hypotheses that I'm aware of, all start with the universe in some form of energy that energy expanding, cooling, and that's how we get matter. Right? So I don't
There's like energy that we start with, correct?
Yep.
So the thing is, we could say that energy has always been there.
Yes.
Or that energy.
As far as we can tell, yes. Yes, as far as we can tell.
The reason,
Well,
I don't believe we can accurately say that it has always been there, because that would mean we have an infinitely regressing timeline, which I believe.
No.
just to clarify, the word always. God, here we go with our semantics. It's necessary, I promise. When you say always, do you mean up until like the point that we call the Big Bang or the Planck time, which is as far back as we can observe? Or when you say always, do you mean that and whatever series of events created the universe? Just because those are two very different things, because the part that's unclear is everything that created the universe, because we can't, at the present moment, observe that back in time, because there's like a before time and space-time is et cetera,
Yes.
and there's math I can't do. Because if you mean since then, the law of conservation of mass and energy, but I don't know how you can take that observation and that law of science that applies to the normal events in space-time and say before space-time acted the way that we know, this law in it would definitely also apply.
Right. And that's the other thing I was going to bring up too is the concept of space-time. Most of the physicists that I'm aware of think that space and time are the same thing, and they refer to it as space-time. So space and time came into existence at the same point for whatever, if that even makes sense, of before there was time, right? So that's part of the problem, I think, too, is that you're saying, there's only a certain point that we know, and that the math for us works, and then our understanding of that high energy level of physics starts to break down, and we don't currently have any way to test anything or to set up any kind of experiment because the energy levels are just way too high for us, for our current level of technology. So you're right, we don't know, and science doesn't make any claims. Right?
Yeah, no, this is really like interesting stuff. I guess my claim would have to be made within the confines of space and time. I think outside of space and time, what I'm saying wouldn't even really rationally make any sense.
I agree.
But I guess, you did mention that space and time, I don't know if you used the word start point, but you mentioned like it came into being at a certain point.
Well, there's
space and time.
Space and time are the same thing essentially.
So it's like four dimensions of space-time. It's sort of like in the same way that the space part of space-time we can observe expanding. I mean, okay, this is the part where I go, well, I'm not a physicist, but it sort of seems like we're being stretched through that fourth dimension in a way that we don't.
We call time,
because we're being stretched through it.
Right. So those two things. It's all really, really fascinating to hear physicists and theoretical physicists talk about what we know and what we can know and what we don't know about the beginning, right? And this is where most theists and most atheists are going to begin to disagree, because most theists say we don't know, therefore God, and atheists just stop at we don't know.
And optimists say, we don't know yet.
The way I would word it, for myself would be that I know that what we observe around us cannot be explained by something within the confines of space and time. I know these bounds have to be broken.
How?
At least the way I understand things.
How? How would you go about demonstrating this?
Well, I cannot demonstrate it, but I can kind of make a negative claim, and that, of course, as I mentioned, that negative claim would be based on the law of conservation of energy.
Right. Which we've already established you don't fully understand quite yet and need to do some more study on. So.
Snap.
I guess you feel that way. I don't think that's the case.
Yeah.
I didn't hear you say anything that I feel invalidates what I'm saying. You kind of mentioned the universe you kind of went to the Earth a few times, so I feel like there's a little mix-up there. But then after that, you do mention some pretty interesting points regarding space and time, almost as though we are going from a state of timeless space to a state of spaceless time. That's almost what it sounded like.
No, space and time are intricately linked. So it sounded like I was trying to separate those two concepts. I wasn't. They're the same concept.
No, yeah, and that's kind of why it's almost like one has to go into the other, right? Because they cannot.
It's a little bit like saying height and width, right? They're the same. They refer to different, literally, dimensions of the same shape. So you can say that the width of a geometric shape is expanding and the height is expanding, or they're expanding together, or that. So in the same way that you can say space and time, space being those first three dimensions of our existent universe, time just being the other one that we're, as we can perceive, being stretched through, or whatever phrase you want. So it's a little bit like the way that you're saying they're going to go into each other, or the beautiful chiasmus you've used of, a spaceless time becoming a timeless space. I'm not sure how that applies, because it's sort of like a widthless height becoming a heightless width. Say that 10 times fast. It's sort of like is a horizontal line stretching into a vertical line. It wouldn't really be even a different shape if you're moving it. I've been on a math kick lately, so I've got geometric shapes running over my eyes. But it's the same concept of, in the same way you'd say height and width are the same concept of space, time, and then the three dimensions of space are the same elements of space-time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Well, I would say a little bit of that kind of went a little over my head. I'm curious.
I mean, it goes over my head too. I'm not that good at math that I'm like, oh, here, let me write an entire. Yeah. My cousin. It's one of these things. If you see someone get they get their master's, they get some other postgraduate thing that I've forgotten because I don't understand, and then they do like a doctorate in it, and you try and they give it to you to proofread, and you understand like 3 of the words in the first 5 pages, and it's like, hey, does this sentence have a subject in it? And you go, oh yes, this equation, and that represents the collective heat of all of the stars on the left or something. And then you keep going because, I don't know, although he works with how trees talk to each other. But yeah, the math goes over my head as well, is the long and short of that ramble.
Okay.
And I'm pretty tall.
Let me ask, and I'm
Yeah.
so sorry if I'm getting a little repetitive here, but for what reason can we not apply that to the beginning of the universe as a whole, if we do accept the universe as isolated?
So it's the questions the other way around is, conceptually, I can conceive of all of the matter and universe that forms whatever space-time, etc., that began at the Big Bang. I can imagine some type of negative before, like, I don't know, there's a central point and a rubber band bouncing back and forth across it, and at this point the rubber band is expanding, and this is us expanding in this direction, and then we get to a point of expansion and the world crunches down into nothing, the big crunch, or it expands so far that it freezes because entropy overcomes the existence of energy and we freeze. But I don't have a good reason to apply this rule before. So I don't understand what happened before, the Planck time. And I don't know whether that would follow any of the laws of what's happening afterwards, right? I don't know how seeds work. I'm just on the flower of a plant.
Yeah, and that goes back to saying we don't know. I mean, there's a certain amount of science we know. There's a certain amount of things we do know about the earliest times of the universe, but there's a certain amount we don't know and we can't know because we just don't have the physics or the language to describe it.
Yeah.
So it seems like essentially maybe the laws of physics as we know it, they're not necessarily applicable to that kind of point in time.
We don't know how to apply them. We don't know what they are. As you start getting into higher and higher energy physics, things start getting, you start getting into more and more quantum stuff, and it gets weirder and weirder, and we just don't have the math. We don't understand it. We don't have any way to even approach the amount of energy that was present at the time. So, I mean, you can go back and there's dozens of astrophysicists talking about this kind of thing and talking about what we knew and what we know and what we don't know about the beginnings of the universe, right? And the real point is that none of this requires a God. We can explain everything through naturalistic methods as far as we can. And again, this is where theists and atheists usually depart ways, is we say we don't know, you agree that we don't know, but you tack on, therefore God.
Well, me personally, I tack on, I don't know, but I do know it was not natural. It's not natural means. Because
that's the exact same. Okay, so it's not natural. Yeah. So how did you? So here's kind of the problem. Are you familiar with the argument from ignorance?
Not exactly.
Okay, because you just said it. I don't know, therefore it wasn't natural, is a conclusion based on no evidence.
Yeah.
And that is essentially the argument from incredulity or the argument from ignorance. And it's a fallacy. It's bad logic.
Somebody committed murder. I don't know who. It must have been Steve.
No, but what I'm saying is someone committed murder. I don't know who, but I can point to one person who I can prove it's not them, and I could say, I know it's not him. Who did it? I don't know, but I know it's not him. So the same way, I know it's not natural beginning, that it's not possible.
Can you explain how you eliminated a natural beginning as the guilty part? I'm going to let this analogy go because it's going to get really. If I go, well, how do you know that nature isn't guilty of murdering existence into existence? But that gets a little bit confusing. So how did you eliminate?
Because of nature.
Yeah.
Because of nature's laws. That that's why I think that. But of course, you mentioned a Planck time, which could give some sort of explanation to this stuff that I'm saying, because I'm just
there's
applying laws as we understand.
There is no theory. There is no hypothesis that I'm aware of regarding the early parts of the Big Bang that stipulate that there was no energy. So there is no there is no hypothesis that violates any of the laws of thermodynamics that I'm aware of for the early parts of the Big Bang. None.
Okay.
There is no hypothesis for the early parts of the Big Bang that proposes something came from nothing. None. The only people saying something comes from nothing are theists. I have not heard a single scientist talking about a single hypothesis for that time talking about something from nothing. So anyway, we've got to let you go. We've been talking to you for a really long time. And
sure, guys.
It's been a good conversation. Feel free to call back.
All right, for sure.
Thanks.
You guys take care.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how that conversation was going to go in terms of like getting twisted into, cosmology and science that I,
Well, it's hard
would
enough
need
for us to
help
explain stuff we
completing the
barely
homework
understand.
of. Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting. It's sort of like,
Anyway, if you guys like what we do, and I assume the people in the audience do, that's why they're here, and you'd like to support us, and those of you in chat too, here are some of the best ways to support the Atheist Experience and the ACA. You can become a member for as little as 99 cents a month. Click the join button below the video. This will give you access to special chat emojis, a bunch of other cool stuff. The Atheist Experience is just one of our shows that we put on here at the ACA. Make sure to check out our other shows as well. Secular Sexuality on Thursdays starting at 7 p.m. Central. Truth Wanted airs live Fridays at 7. And then we have our Sunday shows. Talk Heathen airs at 1 p.m. The Non-Prophets is on right before this show at 3 p.m. Central. And you can also support us on Patreon at tiny.cc/PatreonAXP. And I think we have a live studio question.
Hello. How you doing?
Doing well. What's your question?
My question is, so often a lot of the times when objections are brought up against religion, whether it be, let's say Christianity, for example, about, let's say, the problem of evil, or maybe like, hey, the Bible seems to have contradictions, anything like that. A lot of times they seem to dismiss it off, well, you're not God, so you're just merely human with limited knowledge, so you're in no position to make any of these claims. It's often used like for Job, when I often question Job, like, well, why did God do these things? And then they say, well, just he's in no position to make any of these claims about God. So how do we respond to that, or how would you respond to that if someone were to tell you, like, you're not God, so that kind of deal.
Neither is he, and neither were the people who edited and brought together the 66-book anthology we call the Bible. Right? It was edited and curated by human beings for the purposes of human beings, and those purposes were not history. They were, in fact, theology. And they weren't God either. So how do they know any of this is correct? The Protestants use 66 books, and the Catholics use 72. So who's to say who's right? Where are those extra books coming from, right? And those aren't the only books, right? We got a bunch of other books. How do we know those weren't the real ones? Because, the devil can read scripture too, So you could bring, if you want to go snarky, you can do that and go snarky. Otherwise,
we? No.
Yeah.
I was
Not that Jamie would ever do anything that was snarky.
Yeah, my answer depends on the rest of the conversation somewhat. So, there's a little bit of that. And then if I really wanted to get something, I'd be like, you can go anywhere with that question. You can even go to a game of Portal. I think that's an Aperture Science situation. I'm a fan as well. The snarkiest response I could get is like, oh, how can you question that? You're not God, would be, yes, I am. How do you know I'm not?
Yeah.
If you really wanted to go like, oh, okay, you're making these claims about the way the world works, and you say that you know what God is, how do you know that I'm not God and that this isn't your one moment to like completely demonstrate your faith that a person in front of you is God in the most twisted backwards way from the way that you learned, because I only want the most obedient, faithful atheist followers ever. And so if you're just going to make claims based on whatever you can imagine God is and then say that that's the way the country or the world should work, you're doing exactly the same thing that everyone that's founded a violent caliphate, that everyone that's founded a political cult, that's everyone that's founded a regular cult. And so you can just point out, well, that response doesn't explain anything, and I don't think that it should persuade anyone. So I don't know why you're saying, oh, well, the ideas you're presenting to me are invalid because of you. Whether or not a pizza delivery person is washed or well-spoken or really awkward, I'm still going to eat the pizza when it comes if it's good. So if someone brings me a good argument, whether they're a Christian or an atheist, I'll accept it or I won't accept it based on that. And talking about that is where I would go with that, because for me it's about epistemology and where you start.
And the other cool thing about the yes, I am God line is now you can feed back to the Christians every stupid line they've ever given you. God works in mysterious ways. He doesn't do things the way we want to all the time, and he don't have the big picture. Any of those lines you've heard that you found really, really annoying, you now get to give them back.
The snarkiest thing to do is to present your face and then hold up a mirror for the rest of it and be like, but what if I was exactly doing the same thing as you? Does it work?
Right. And the reason we're going this way instead of a logical response is because that is not it's not logical, right?
Argument.
They're trying to shut down the conversation.
Yeah.
And now we're just giving you a couple ways to open it back up and to show them that they're what they're doing.
If you're going to open it back up, because at that point you can be like, well, what is your authority to speak for God as well?
Right.
Because it's either humans are not qualified for this, in which case why are you talking about it, or we can discuss it, in which case why don't we?
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. And that's true of a lot of conversation enders like that, which is sometimes what that is. So read the room a little bit and see if they're just trying to end the conversation because you've made them uncomfortable so far. Yeah. And sometimes the best thing you can do is shut the fuck up, right? If you're reading a room right and they're uncomfortable, letting them walk away and let that kind of percolate in their brains for a little while can, in many cases, do more good than continuing to argue with them and continue to put them on the back heel.
Because nothing makes people more irrational than feeling some type of way about what they've just been told or said or shown. Mm-hmm. So, like you said, read the room, and then sure, I can give snarky responses, but I'm a humanist ultimately, and I'm giving that snarky response here and now because there's 4 strong walls to protect me, and then also because there isn't someone here who I'm offending deliberately. But,
right. So just like I said, just kind of read the room with that because you can go too far, and sometimes you're going to screw it up and accept that because after all, we're human. We don't think perfectly, sadly.
Unless you're me, I do perfectly every time.
For you think perfectly.
Well, I'm God, so.
All right, I hope we answered your question.
Yeah.
All right.
I think we might have answered it twice and then kept talking.
We've never done that
never
before
done that,
in
yeah.
the history of us doing anything together.
I don't know whether you rubbed off on me or I rubbed off on you, or we've got that same vibe.
Yeah, same vibe, I think. Okay. What do you think about number 9 here? Or 11. 11 looks good. Or 12? What do you think? I think we'll go with this one. All right. This is Wesley in West Virginia, who says he knows a little bit about demon possession. Jesus has loosened Satan multiple times.
Surprise!
Say what?
Hi. Surprise! Surprise! Surprise!
Why are we surprised?
You never watched Gomer Pyle, I guess.
I have watched Gomer Pyle, and he was surprised and did things that were surprising. I'm not sure what you're doing that's surprising at the moment.
And I don't know what a Gomer is or how you'd get a pile of them, but I'm interested to learn.
Simply greeting you.
There's a core of a joke you're missing there.
Oh. Yeah. Well, the apple's better without the core, so I don't know.
All right. So Wesley, you know something about demon possession. How do you know anything at all about demons? How do you know they even exist?
Well, it happened to me, and I believe a thing happened to everyone. One time it happened to me, and the second time I only know that it happened, and it didn't happen to me. The dates were October 10, 2005, March 31st, 2020.
Let's talk about October 10th, 2005. Tell me what happened.
October 10, 2005, I was laying in bed, and I was paralyzed, like an electric shock was coursing inside of my body. And this electric shock spoke loudly in my mind the words, "I will turn and toss you violently like a ball." And as it spoke, it was breathless. It was waterless. It was like I was a radio, and it was transmitting into my head, and I couldn't stop it no matter what I did. And I was paralyzed.
Okay, I'm sorry for jumping in here. Just to clear, did you say waterless?
Yeah, waterless, like a waterless cloud.
What?
It wasn't.
Wait,
it was,
sorry.
it
The
was
voice
like
was?
It was a fire, electricity. It felt like an electric shock.
Okay, I really am just sort of.
Yeah, I'm stuck on the waterless cloud.
I don't know
because
what
the cloud is by definition water.
Well, that and then like if it's a voice, I don't know how a voice has water. I literally don't. I literally don't know what you mean. Does my voice have water?
It's a poetic way that I describe.
Oh, okay.
It's
you don't
poetic.
mean that it.
Okay, can we leave the
Yeah.
poetry out and stick to brass tacks? Because poets can describe a whole bunch of things in really, really interesting ways that are really, really cool, but they don't really have much to do sometimes with the reality of the situation. So you were lying in bed, you were paralyzed. There's a physical condition that we actually do as human beings when we fall asleep. Where we are in fact paralyzed, and sometimes we do sort of
Hypnagogic sleep paralysis. It's
I'm trying to remember the name.
Hypnagogic sleep paralysis.
It's a sleep paralysis. Yeah. So how did you eliminate sleep paralysis and you basically having a waking dream, as opposed to something supernatural?
Well, I guess that's just what I say and what I believe. Simple as that.
Okay, so you didn't actually try to eliminate sleep paralysis as a cause.
Well, I was paralyzed. I was in bed asleep when it happened. So if you want to call it sleep paralysis, that's okie doke with me.
Well, this is an actual thing that you can be diagnosed with, and an actual thing that happens. And I've had it happen to me at least twice.
Yeah,
where I partially woke up and couldn't move.
That's what a demon does.
Except that, I see. The thing is, when doctors tell me that this can actually go in and explain it and recreate it, that tells me it's natural, not supernatural. So how do you come to a supernatural conclusion when we have perfectly natural reasons for it happening?
Okay. March 31st.
No, we're sticking with October 10th. We're sticking with October 10th. I need to know how you eliminated something we know happens naturally and has natural causes. How did you leap to a supernatural conclusion from that?
I'm going to give you that conclusion.
No, I want the method. I want the method.
Sure.
Let him give the method real quick.
Okay, yeah. I think that's...
He pulled a fire down from heaven. He pulled a fire down from heaven.
How do you know that? How do you know he pulled a fire down from heaven? And what does pull fire down from heaven even mean?
It is also written that out of the mouth of the false, out of the mouth of the dragon,
where?
Out of the mouth of the false prophet, out of the mouth of the beast, I saw an unclean spirit.
So where are you getting this from?
Okay.
Where is this written?
It's written, I believe it's in Isaiah.
Who cares what the Bible says? The Bible is the claim, not the evidence.
Yeah.
Bible claims all kinds of things we know aren't true, right? Burning bushes don't talk. Snakes don't talk. There's all kinds of really badly told fantasy elements in this book, and we're asking you for the method to say that no, this phenomena, sleep paralysis, which we know have natural explanations, how you came to a supernatural conclusion as the cause. Sure. And I want the methodology. Sure. I don't want you quoting the Bible at me because the Bible is irrelevant. What's your methodology? Sure.
Well, I'll tell you what your god Satan told you. Don't tell the vision, and out of his mouth he vomited Allah.
Oh, come on. You're not. No. We're going to meet you. We're going to meet you. Okay. So,
go for it.
A methodology is a set of steps that you follow every single time that you do an investigation so you can come to the correct conclusion. It's not reading the Bible. Because 1,000 different denominations at least have interpreted the Bible 1,000 different ways, and they all disagree on fundamental points that they should not be disagreeing on. So until now you got to do one more thing. You got to prove that your interpretation of the Bible is correct, which there's 1,000 denominations, so probably not there. But what is your methodology? And don't quote the Bible because we don't care.
Okay.
He should be live. I think. Well, so
okay.
Yeah.
So what is the methodology?
The proof is 2 teeth healed in your mouth that I asked Jesus to give you, every one of you.
I'm sorry.
2 teeth? I haven't had any. I only have 1 tooth broken, and it's still broken.
Because it's the truth. You interrupt because it's the truth, and you deny it.
I'm sorry. Do you mean like literal teeth? Is this?
That's what you do, and that's why it attacked you.
Do you mean literal? No, I haven't had a demon attack me because I don't even know what a demon is or how to detect it. You haven't determined. You haven't given us a single way. Not going back on mute again because you're. Please, let's focus on the methodology. What methodology did you use to come up with a supernatural reason for something we know has natural causes? What is that methodology?
Did I tell you this?
You were just on mute. Were you talking the entire time? He dropped.
All right. Well, so my question was going to be, okay, so you've experienced sleep paralysis, and you've said that on such and such a date, it was a demon. Okay. Well, let's pause for a moment and say, how did you eliminate that as an alternate explanation? Not of all sleep paralysis. Let's just start with yours, which is if it's possible for human beings to experience paralysis, is the only way that ever happens demons? That's the only explanation that ever happens? Or sometimes the organs and organ systems in the human body, neurology and brain, etc., have some issue that causes paralysis. Or it could also be caused by demons. And if you get to the hey, people can die in multiple ways, people can fall asleep for multiple reasons, people could experience sleep paralysis for multiple reasons, what did you do to determine which of the possible explanations we could know of, not to mention all of the possible explanations that we don't necessarily know of? What did you do to eliminate those? But I don't think we were going to get there. I think he was probably going to quote Isaiah at least once more.
Yeah, I think he was preaching at us rather than attempting to have a conversation. So, but anyway, I think most of us probably do this. Most of us probably shop on Amazon. And you can actually support the ACA at no cost to you. Simply visit tiny.cc/AmazonSmileACA. That's tiny.cc/AmazonSmileACA. Spell those normally. And designate the Atheist Community of Austin as your selected charity, and Amazon will donate a portion of their profit directly to the ACA. We also have a single channel that houses all of our shows in the ACA in podcast form. Visit tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. There you can listen to all the latest shows from the Atheist Experience, Talk Heathen, Truth Wanted, Secular Sexuality, the Nonprofits, and others, all on one channel. We also have 3 Facebook groups that are run by fans for fans that you can interact with. The first is the Atheist Experience fan group at tiny.cc/FBAXP. There's also the Atheist Experience private fan group where you can interact with others without having those interactions appear on your public feed at tiny.cc/FBAXPPR. And we have a brand new group, the Atheist Experience fan group, Atheist versus Theist Debates, where you can try out some of your arguments on theists and atheists alike. You can find that at tiny.cc/AXP fan debates. And I'll honestly say that sometimes if you find me on there, I get so exasperated that I'm far snarkier and far meaner than I probably should be. And I will apologize. Well, not really, because I'll keep doing it. So that's kind of what happens. Do we have another audience question? No. Okay.
Oh, I was just going to say really quick on the Amazon thing. If you believe that great captain of industry, that lord of the Amazon serfs, some of whom I drive to work here every day, has enough money and should maybe chip, I don't know, a penny out of every $10 kajillion he makes to support a cause you believe in, if you think Jeff Bezos should donate some of his money to the ACA, here's a link that changes practically nothing about your life except that Jeff Bezos helps us stay on the air. Amazon Smile.
Yeah. Okay.
And if I had bigger shiny Jesus teeth, I'd smile big shiny Jesus, I guess.
Yeah, I'm wondering. He said he fixed my teeth.
Does
so much.
he need literal teeth? I'm flabbergasted that I can always learn something new that's like obscure sounding and specific like that. That's like related to the, we got another how caller. Wide is your path? How narrow? How bright is your continent? Yeah. Go quick.
Right. Okay, here we go. This is Mark in New York. You think you have a reason to think that God exists?
Yeah. How are you, gentlemen?
Doing pretty good. Looking forward to hearing this reason. I hope it's a good one.
Good and godless.
Good, man. Yeah, no, I just actually started tuning in about 10, 15 minutes ago when you were on the tail end of a conversation, I think it was 2 calls ago, with the gentleman there about cosmology and the Big Bang. So I kind of wanted to pick up on that thread, if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
Sure. I'm sure you guys are very familiar in the chat with the one of the ancient arguments, the Kalam cosmological argument.
Yes, the argument that doesn't get you to God, and that modern quantum mechanics kind of blows apart. Yeah, we're familiar with that one.
The new Coke of the first cause argument that everyone got real excited about, but it has a bad taste.
Right. Yeah. That one. Yeah, we're familiar.
Well, you're right. It doesn't get you to God. It gets you to the cause of the universe, and then you have to do a separate analysis as to what that is. And so, I don't think it's a shortcoming of the argument because it's a modest argument, and I think that's actually a strength.
Except that quantum mechanics has shown that things do happen for no reason.
Well,
it breaks the argument right there. Right?
No, I actually I disagree with that because I would offer 2 responses to that. Number one, if you're talking about like the decay of a particle as a result of quantum mechanics, it's not happening for no reason. It's happening because of the laws of physics.
No, actually, they have shown that particles pop into and out of existence for no particular reason at all, and that they don't need a reason to pop in and out of existence. These are
nothing happens that's not. Are you saying it's not consistent with the laws of physics?
I'm saying it's consistent with the laws of quantum mechanics, which dictate that particles pop into and out of existence without any cause. Yes.
It's sort of like we've gone beyond like the Newtonian, I can observe a tennis ball bouncing and measure every part of it and then say I'm a physicist and then calculate an equation that requires it to be smooth and there be no friction and wind. But trying to understand things at the quantum level after being able to understand things you can easily observe is like trying to understand how a television show works if you can't look behind the scenes. So when we get down to the quantum level, the level beyond basically anything that we interact with, it really is crazy what the findings show. It doesn't work like anything that we know because we ain't quantum people, yo. Right? So, you know, I'm 6'1".
There are experiments that show that the cause for a phenomena is sometimes in the future and not in the past, like you would think. Quantum physics gets very, very weird very, very quickly. You can go look at the experiments and go look at the data. It's amazing what they're doing with quantum. And we don't know how what happens at the quantum mechanical level percolates up into, you know, the normal universe, so to speak, and what we normally think of in terms of the laws of physics. So.
Okay. Well, like I don't want to get bogged down on this particular point because there's a version of the Kalam that is more modest, where it actually the quantum example is not an objection because it's a more modest version of the Kalam. It's not, because the traditional Kalam is everything that begins to exist has a cause, and there's
except the universe.
More modest version.
Yeah.
Right, but there's a more modest version of it where I think the first premise is if the universe has a cause. It's basically, I don't have it in front of me, but it's a more modest version because William Lane Craig is, you know, this is obvious.
I'm very familiar with all of his versions, and they all run into the same problem. In fact, there's a really good set of YouTube videos done by actual physicists refuting everything he says. Yeah. And then, of course, there's that really, really great moment in his debate with Sean Carroll, where Sean Carroll puts up a photo of the physicist that William Lane Craig likes to quote, saying you can't come to that conclusion.
Yeah.
Basically saying that William Lane Craig is incorrect. And so, I mean, William Lane Craig, I'm sure he's a great brain, but when it comes to science, I think he's slightly less out of depth than myself or Jamie here, but he's still completely out of his depth.
Okay, so
drawing wide conclusions about the fundamental aspects of the universe outside of experimental data, for me, it's sort of like, okay, well, if you can't get there with a mathematic proof, right, and you can't get there with evidence that suggests directly this point, and you don't spend your time asking and seeking an answer that you might never get by doing math and like trying to observe the universe, and you're just trying to put it together logically. For me, I'd put that logic question together and then I'd go find someone who does do those things and ask them, right? Like that time that I thought, hey, what if the properties of matter that get lost when matter falls into a black hole are related to dark matter? And I had no way of answering that. And it was in my mind. And I was like, okay, well, I can't write a handwritten letter to someone. And then eventually I bumped into a cosmologist. I asked him that and he was like, oh no, that's an interesting thought, but actually from the math, we can tell that it's a different thing. And then I learned from it. But the statement, thank goodness that I drink way too much energy drink, otherwise I would have spilled something everywhere. The thing that I would do is say, okay, well, here's an interesting thought, here's an interesting question, but I wouldn't conclude, oh, okay, this is a good reason to come to the conclusion that there's an all-powerful force or that there's a particular meaning in this incredibly large existence that relates to me, because I don't have any good evidence for it. I don't have a blank plus blank equals blank, either in evidence or in math, to suggest something beyond what cosmologists who can explain things I can't explain would explain. Right. I don't know more than people that spend all of their time understanding the evidence know.
Yeah. So I mean, even if we grant, for the sake of argument, okay, the Kalam sort of kind of makes sense, right? We grant that. How do you get to a God from there? You can't get to a God from there, right? Because all you have is the universe began, and then all of a sudden you leap to some sort of God. And this is again, I said it before on that other call, right? This is where atheists and theists depart. Atheists and theists agree we don't know, but theists add in this, therefore God. And every argument I've seen that builds on top of the Kalam is simply asserting things with no evidence. At least with the Kalam, we have some evidence, right? I mean, if you don't understand quantum physics, the Kalam makes perfect sense.
Well, okay.
Yeah, no,
so
but
it
you-
does
let
then-
him go.
so- oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, so there was a video put out this week by William Lane Craig and Stephen Meyer. Stephen Meyer has a PhD in the philosophy of religion from Cambridge, and he was a scientist before that, so he's very well steeped in the physics. They were both on a panel, and I'm just mentioning it because I think you guys understand the issue like very, very well, and I think you would benefit from listening to it. I
have never benefited from listening to William Lane Craig, so I will go ahead and listen to it just to be complete. No, I find him to be more insufferably arrogant than I am, and that is saying something, because I know people will tell you I'm the most insufferably arrogant person they know, even though I try not to be, but it does happen. But yeah, I don't find it to be useful at all, or find it useful.
You don't learn things from people if you find them arrogant?
No, I'm willing to learn anything from anybody, but he doesn't say anything worth listening to, right? Because he's here's and I had a different opinion before. William Lane Craig said that the reason that he believed was none of the things that he says, right? None of his arguments convinced him to believe in God. What convinced him to believe in God was realizing that somebody loved him, right? You listen to that thing and it's like, okay, therefore, none of these arguments should work on me either. I should just accept his personal experience, and that doesn't work for me either. So yeah, if his arguments weren't convincing to him, why should they be convincing to me or you?
I think what he means is that absent his personal belief, I think he's kind of speculating like the arguments wouldn't convince him, but he does have the personal belief, and when you combine the two.
I think what Jim is pointing out is that he believed, and in part of his and as part of his ministry, he has created this presentation and these arguments. And for a lot of people, particularly if part of the reason that a person believes and is persuaded is a feeling or a paralysis experience, and they then turn around and say, you should be persuaded to believe what I believe for this other reason on a chalkboard. Okay, maybe, but it's sort of like, okay, well, why did you write this on a chalkboard and go to science and cosmology and quote people that say, hey, stop quoting me this way, you're misquoting me? I think that definitely gives a lot of people the impression that, okay, well, if you're willing to quote things, I don't want to say wrong, but wrong, and just say, oh, I'm quoting this guy, this is what he believes, even though he disagrees, it gives me every impression that I shouldn't spend my time listening to a minute of William Lane Craig and then pausing so that I can check every claim that he's made, because he's demonstrated a type of disregard for the work of the scientists that he's quoting.
Right. No, I hear you. I would like to respond to something that Jim said, which is he referenced the debate with Sean Carroll. I watched that debate, and I know that the part of the debate that you're talking about, where Sean Carroll says he.
You're losing volume here on us. Oh, there you go.
Okay, so there was the part of the debate that Sean Carroll said that he emailed Alexander Vilenkin about the Borg-Guth-Vilenkin theorem, and that it sort of was like a refutation to Bill Craig.
Yes.
Bill Craig subsequently reached out to Alexander Vilenkin and had extensive discussions with him about that issue. I'm not going to get into it here, but I think you would. I think I understand like the personality thing, and people can come across like grating, and that's that gets in the way. But I think you would learn, because that's something like, it sounds like you're very like knowledgeable about the subject, and
Yeah. And,
yes, they're coming from the theistic perspective, but they do have something to offer.
right. And I do listen. Like I said, I'll go and listen to this, even though I'm not a big William Lane Craig fan. But when the guy says that this didn't convince him, not only that, but that we should lower our bar of evidence, well, I mean, he comes off like a used car salesman when he does stuff like that. But I'm going to give you the last word, and then we're going to move on to the next caller. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would just say that, just as the last word, I would just say that personally, I don't believe in God because of these arguments as standalone arguments. Like, the analogy that I would make is, because you reference like, we don't have evidence. I think the best analogy is, what evidence do you have that someone loves you? It could be your wife or somebody like that.
Their actions.
What evidence do you have that the person loves you?
Their actions.
You're never going to have. I'm sorry?
Their actions.
What they do.
Their actions, but that's not definitive. That's not something that you could be fooled. The person could not love you, and you could be interpreting their actions as them loving you.
Yeah.
So there's
I've
an
been
element
conned before, but part of the point is we have that evidence. I can interact definitively with my aunt, and I can tell you, oh, my aunt loves me. These are the things. And sure, 99% sure is pretty much as sure as I'm ever willing to let myself say, oh, yeah, I believe this with 99% certainty, because I say, hey, that maybe there's things I don't know. Maybe she's, an Illuminati plant and part of a conspiracy, or maybe she's just putting on, two faces. But until I have good evidence to go, oh, no, my aunt hates me, or oh, no, my aunt doesn't love me, I'm not going to believe that she doesn't until I have good evidence. And I'm also not going to believe that my aunt loves me if I have no evidence that my aunt exists.
You have faith because you have reason to believe. You have reason to believe that the proposition is true.
Which is a belief, not faith.
That's the most you're ever going to have. You're never going to have.
That's not faith.
Yeah. Right? It's not a mathematical proof.
No, we're not asking for mathematical proofs.
Yeah,
we're not asking for mathematical proofs, right?
And what we're saying is the evidence isn't enough.
For evidence, convincing evidence.
Yeah.
Right? You can't go to the Bible.
What evidence would it take?
Not a problem.
What evidence would it take, though?
I don't know.
For which particular God?
What evidence would it take to convince you?
I don't know.
If you don't know, then it's not falsifiable. Then you're basically saying, I can't falsify.
No, what he's What he's describing is himself and what would or wouldn't cause him to believe.
Right.
Not what the universe is or what could be provided. So if you ask me how I'm feeling and I tell you, you can try and persuade me that I'm wrong, but we're still both talking about me. And when you asked him what would cause him to believe, and he said, you know what, I don't know what would cause me to believe. You saying, oh, well, then that's evidence that you should believe, or that's evidence that other people would, should take to disregard what he says or to believe in God. I don't see it. What I see is you going, well, if you don't know what would persuade you to believe, then how am I supposed to persuade you? I don't know, man. At this point, I've spent a long time looking at this. My heart is open, my mind is open, but nothing that I see and nothing that's been presented to me. And people have gone out of their way, been really creative. There's cosmological arguments here. For thousands of years, they've been presenting arguments. For hundreds of years, they've been collecting scientific data. Right now, you can find Christian and Muslim apologists making this argument and that argument. More people than one, have used more creativity than I have to come up with every argument and every collection of evidence to demonstrate this to me. They've thought of things that I wouldn't have thought of initially, but nothing that they've presented to me, argument or evidence-wise, has persuaded me. That's the situation it is. We're at the point where I can't even imagine an argument or something that they could find that is within the realm of like, oh yeah, someone could find a bone or whatever. Nothing like that I can think of right now without prompting would persuade me. And that's because everything that they can find, every argument that they can think of, every bit of dust or evidence that they can present, they've found so far. So I'll wait here and I'll be open, and if they find something completely new, I'll look at it. And if they present a new argument, I'll listen to it. But man, they've been working at it so hard, I can't even imagine what they're gonna come up with next. So forgive me for
I
failing
mean,
to imagine something super special, but I'm pretty sure that if there's an all-powerful being that wants me to know that that all-powerful being exists, that can commune with me and that has a personal interest in my life, that being knows how to persuade me. So why doesn't he?
Well, he doesn't because it has to be a free choice. If, of course, God could, if God exists, right?
It has to be a free choice for me to believe, or it has to be a free choice for me to be willing to believe. Because I made that free choice, and I believed, and then I asked, the teacher, God, to grade my homework, and I realized that I was scribbling on a piece of paper and I couldn't find what a classroom was. Basically, when I looked around and tried to find the evidence of God or the argument that was going to persuade me to still be a believer, I looked. It was a free choice. I looked around and I don't see anything. Additionally, it wasn't a free choice for every character in the Bible, forgive me for assuming Christian, but for every character in the Bible that saw God or that saw a pillar of salt or saw a pillar of smoke or saw fire, that is something that happened in front of them that wasn't their friend or their neighbor or a caller saying, well, you should believe, choose to believe.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I respect what you said. I mean, if you're keeping an open mind, I think that's all you could do. And, it comes to us at different points in our lives. You guys both seem actually pretty young guys. And so you have the rest of your lives ahead of you where you never know, and it's like my beliefs might change. Right now, I think God exists, and it's possible that might change down the road. I think all we could do is try to be intellectually honest with ourselves. Mm-hmm. Be willing to learn from other people. That's why I like actually calling into the show. To challenge my beliefs. And so I think we benefit from these conversations. And, that's really, all we could do.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for reiterating a large part of what we believe here at the ACA. And, I can really respect that. Yep. I really respect the openness, the calling in. It makes it hard to make a snarky joke. I'm looking for one. But, yeah, I can really respect that. And I keep an open mind as well. But I don't see it, man.
But you call in if you got a better argument.
Yeah, call in. I am often lazy, so if you find something that you think I haven't heard, bring it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, bring it in a friendly sense, rather than like.
Thanks, Mark.
I will, guys.
Talk to you later. Bye. He called me young.
I wasn't gonna say really young. Can you provide some evidence of that claim? Because I don't.
One of us has been around for a little over half a century. The other one just thinks he's old.
Yeah, the other one's just starting to feel old.
Okay. Yeah, we're not taking that one.
He missed the call earlier where I said I was feeling old, and you told me to get off your lawn.
That wasn't a call. It was before the show started.
Yeah, that was before that was before the show started.
He starts complaining about being old, and I'm like, dude, just get off my lawn. Yeah. All right, we're going to take
Michael says he knows what... Oh, take one.
Yeah. I want to take Suzanne in Indiana. You're wondering, what our best arguments are against Calvinism.
A specific
Hold on,
thing.
1 second.
I love it.
No problem.
Okay.
Let me make sure. Okay, yeah. Here,
Okay.
hi.
Cool.
So I'm not actually familiar with Calvinism. Is it based on the Bible?
Yeah. Well.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry,
So my generic response to anything based on the Bible is that the Bible is 66 or 72 books curated by man, edited by men for theological purposes, not history or evidence. So, but anyway, go ahead. What is Calvinism, and why should we take it seriously?
Because we have that based on science. It's a collaboration.
Science is a collaboration between religion and science, or?
Yes.
Okay, so what part of science talks about a being outside of space and time actually being able to exist?
My main point is I have an older brother who's a Calvinist and an older sister who's a lesbian and an atheist. So what
and I hope you also
is,
have friendly Thanksgivings, but
Well, my sister hasn't been to a holiday in a couple of years, but that's not a big deal.
It isn't?
Anyway.
She doesn't make
my
that good
point
cranberry
is-
sauce.
Okay, let her make her point.
Sorry.
No. No. My point is, if Calvinism is true, if God made the universe and predestined, you're going to believe this and you're going to believe that. And sorry about you if you're not included. What is the atheist argument against it?
So there's a few aspects of, that people would bring up. So the ones the one that Jim brought up is, regardless of the type of Christianity, whether it's Catholicism, Anglicanism, Church of England, or Calvinism, it's based on Christian traditions and around a central doctrine and around a central testament and scripture, the Bible. And so the stage at which you're talking about, okay, there's science, there's this, there's that, and then we believe what's in the Bible, that point right there, why should we accept that the Bible is a reliable source of claims about the universe, even before we get to the specific predestination?
Right. And if God created the universe and everything in the universe is predestined, that means that God sacrificed his own son and created the universe just to kill his own son. Right? Ultimately is what that means.
Yeah. So
God created the universe.
what's your problem?
Pardon?
I think it's probably that.
What's the problem?
What's the problem with God wanting to create his own, kill his own son? That means he's not omnibenevolent, right?
Wait, repeat?
If God created the universe just to kill his own son, does that mean he's omnibenevolent?
That might be a misinterpretation that we don't know.
So wait.
No, so God created the universe. I'm getting into the argument right here, right? If God created the universe and it's predestined, everything that happens in it is predestined, and your God is the omni-God, he's omnipotent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent, is it benevolent to create a universe just to kill your own son? Is that benevolent?
Not according to human standards, but according to Christian God standards, yes.
So really quickly, are you judging God based on your standards? Because those are human standards. So there's the argument that we don't live in a particularly benevolent world. There's the argument that in the Bible, the God described is not particularly benevolent. You don't have to quite go to Isaiah 45:7, where God says he created evil, right? But part of the thing is, there's no reason to accept these claims that we see. Additionally, if I were to believe that there's a God who's predestined all of this, then he made me an atheist. Right. And so there isn't a reason for me to believe it. Additionally, why would I accept this argument? I don't have a good reason to give the Bible any weight. Why should I accept that the Bible is a reliable source of truth? Rather than...
You don't have to. You don't have to. Under the Calvinist worldview, it's all predestined.
Okay, so nothing we do matters.
Well, it being predestined in the claim doesn't tell me anything about whether or not I should accept it.
Right.
Right. So either this is true or it's not. Right. Either here I'll give an example. I'm not talking about your beliefs. If someone said, either the events in Star Trek happened or they didn't, and I said, okay, well, why should I believe that these episodes about a show are a reliable source about what happened? And they say, well, Spock saved the entire ship. That doesn't really tell me about whether or not the source of these lessons, the source of the doctrine, is true. In the same way that saying, well, in Calvinism, it's predestined, doesn't tell me anything really about whether or not I should accept the Bible is true.
Or even, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. The bottom line is, if Calvinism is true, then atheists are predestined to not believe.
Okay. And where does that get us? What is that? I mean, first of all, when it comes to that, can you prove that the universe is predestined?
I can. My sister, she'd be like, "Yeah, no, we don't have free will." But me, I'm like, I can choose. I have free will.
Your brain is working and considering multiple options and choosing one. And then I hear this argument, and I always, in my head at least, say, so what? Of we live in a deterministic universe. Whatever decision I make is predestined. Okay, well, the part of decision making that matters to me and to the rest of the world that's hungry and needs sleep and all of this, the thing that we can interact with is that your mind considered multiple options and chose between them. So whether or not that was always going to happen, whether or not you could rewind time, hit play and see if exactly the same thing happened, or whether people made different decisions, you're still making those decisions. So if a person doesn't want to call that free will, then just say, okay, then I've got not free will, but I'm expressing my will. Right? The fact that a rock doesn't choose to roll off a mountain doesn't make it any less heavy. If everything in my mind was predetermined by matter in motion that doesn't have an element of thought to it, it's still a mind, it's still a brain, it's still firing synapses to make my mouth move and make these sounds. So if your question is about predetermination, we can't tell the difference between a predetermined and a not predetermined world, and none of that really has anything directly to do with whether or not I should accept the basic tenets of Christianity.
Right. Or Calvinism in this case.
Yeah. So part of it is I can try and talk about like Calvinist doctrine, but please know that the reason that I don't believe isn't related to whether or not I accept predestination or free will. It's related to, okay, well, here's this religion, and it has a cultural tradition behind it, and it looks to me exactly like every other single religion. In the same way that if I run into 3 used car salesmen and they all tell me they have a super future car that never requires gas because gas prices are ridiculous right now, don't you want to buy it? And I go, well, that doesn't really make sense to me. And they say, hey, if you've got faith and you give me your cash, you'll have a magic car today. And then I hear basically that same pitch, but with slightly different magic vehicles all the way down. And they all have the same sort of, it just works, believe me, and I don't accept that. Then one person saying, well, mine comes with windshield wipers. And the other one says, well, mine's a motorcycle. You're open for the free, you can feel the wind through your hair. Well, that's a secondary question. I'm already not buying the car. So don't try and sell me on the extra features of there's predetermination or there's not. But if you want, we can talk about the doctrines of Calvinism. I just hope that point's gotten across, is that why would I believe any of this? Why would I choose any type of Christianity over Islam? Why would I choose any of them over withholding my belief until it's earned? In this regard, and in only this regard, I'm a real prude about my belief. Not a prude about many other aspects of my life, but in terms of belief, if you want this temple, then persuade me.
I don't want.
Would be my statement to a God, not to you. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm saying, what is your most prolific argument against Calvinism?
Okay. Go ahead.
The Bible is true, and it's all set in Timothy and whatever. And it's all true, and you guys don't have a choice but not to believe, and you're going to hell.
All right.
What argument do you have against
here's the argument in Calvinism. They need to prove that their interpretation of the Bible is correct. There's 1,000 other denominations, all of which disagree with the Calvinist claims. And so they need to prove that their claims are correct about the Bible. Right, that their beliefs about the Bible are true. Given that there's 1,000 other denominations, all of whom disagree, I think, or almost all, nearly all. There's probably branches of Calvinism as well, but there's a large number that disagree with this whole predetermined thing. So they've got to prove that their interpretation of the Bible is correct. And with 1,000 other, the Bible is a single piece of evidence, right? And if we had any other single piece of evidence that had 1,000 different interpretations, all of which disagreed with each other on fundamental points, like predeterminism in this case, we'd throw it out. We'd laugh at it. We wouldn't even accept. We wouldn't even close to accepting as true. We wouldn't touch with a 1,000-foot pole. But it's the Bible and it's religion, so it must be true. No, that's not how this works.
Okay, do you guys subscribe to free will?
Sort of, kind of, maybe.
I might if it doesn't have a subscription fee. It depends on what you mean by free will. So to me, I don't know whether we live in a deterministic universe, but I believe that my mind is thinking, and in as much as you want to define the limits of the decisions that I make, I'm making decisions.
Yeah.
So I suppose, sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah. The evidence is out, or the jury is out for me. Yeah.
All right, so pretend the God of the universe is out there and he's giving you all sort of free will, but you don't have free will and you're going to do what he wants to do.
Then we're just marionettes and who cares?
Yeah, if I have no capacity to affect or really to understand and know some force that's acting on my free will outside of my awareness, then I have no capacity to act or understand it. What if it's true that we're all in the Matrix, pretty much exactly in keeping
Calvinism
with
wins.
No, so here's the thing is,
see, the problem
so
is
does
we're
Catholicism,
rejecting,
so does Islam, so does every other religion.
Lutheranism, they all
The claim
went
that you've made about, well, if it's true, then you wouldn't have free will. Okay, well, if it's true that there's a God that created all of this specifically to see if intelligent life would exist and then accept a naturalistic universe, if there's an atheist gambit type God, well, you better stop accepting bad reasons, or that God is going to send you to an infinitely worse hell than you could imagine. Haha, that claim wins. Oh, if Islam is true, then God has determined everything that happens, and the only way to get there is to serve Islam. Haha, Islam wins. To say, if this is true, you have no free will, Calvinism wins. I don't understand what competition that is, or what it wins, or even what the claim is. If free will doesn't exist, then I'm not freely choosing not to believe. But what would that even mean? That you've started with an if, you've started with a there is a God in the universe, and you've started with a the Bible specifically is a good place to believe. None of those check boxes have been checked. And then beyond that, saying I don't have free will doesn't give me any reason to believe that Jesus Christ sacrificed himself or did anything or any of this.
And whether or not we have libertarian free will or not doesn't prove your God exists. Either way, says nothing about your God.
It doesn't until it does.
That is got to be the...
You know, why don't we make it say something? Because right now it doesn't. So the part where it does have something to say about whether or not God exists, specifically your God that you believe in, let's get to that part. Please tell me about how God exists. Yeah,
that makes no sense whatsoever.
I mean, it's a kind of like
you need to explain that a little bit.
When does it?
All I know is that God has shown up for me in my darkest of times. I'm married to my husband, and I can't have a baby, but
I'm sorry to hear that.
there are some things that I'm like, I have to rely on the promises of the Bible that the barren will bear children, and
do you know what makes that claim true? Actually, science.
What?
Science makes that true, right? There are for some forms of infertility, we have medical procedures that can reverse it or fix it. The Bible has nothing to say about how to go about fixing it, but science does. So again,
but science. What if I want to adopt?
Awesome.
Now I'm married.
I'm adopted.
But my goddamn stupid lesbian sister, if she wants to and adopt a child, she can't.
Well, I think we know. I think we now know why she doesn't come to family events.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and let me say, I think that if a person is capable of providing a home for a child, they should be able to raise a child. So I agree with you that it's like, why can't she adopt? If that's the point you were making.
Yes, and also I'm very sad that I can't have my own children.
Yeah, my parents had to adopt.
I'm sorry to hear that.
My mom couldn't have children. She adopted me, and they adopted me and my sister.
I hope that one day you're presented with a way to have your own child, whether that's through an unexplained happening or an unexplained happening that happens after you pray, or you pray and then new medical science provides a procedure by which you can have a child. I mean, the advancement of medical technology puts a lot of energy towards childbirth and child rearing. Right? Like one of the areas of cancer that we've made the greatest advances is in basically childhood cancer. That mortality rate is way down. And so there's hope. There's hope that researchers and engineers and medical practitioners in science will find, I don't want to say a cure, but like a way for you to have a child, or there's lots of children that need adoption. But I'm sorry to hear about your bad news.
I will tell you right now that my mom does not. My mom doesn't consider me or my sister anything more than her real children, as if she'd given birth to both of us. That has never been a question. I don't know why it's a question here. You can adopt.
You.
Pardon?
That's good for you, but I married late in life, and
yeah. You just need to come to terms with the fact that you may have to adopt. And adopted children are no different than children you give birth to. They're still kids, they're still raised, and they will still love you the same. Doesn't matter.
Well, yeah, sure.
So, anyway, we got to get on and move on to another caller. So, thanks for calling, and call back if you have want to try your arguments for theism again. And we'll talk to you later. Okay, Susan? Thanks.
Thanks for calling in.
All right.
The end of that got kind of like...
Yeah.
It got less about God and more about children.
Yeah, well, we're going to leave the whole...
I believe that children exist.
I have strong opinions, so we're just going to keep going here.
Let's keep going.
So... Some of you may have noticed this handy little shirt that Jamie's wearing, because we have merchandise, and you can get your own shirt and probably look better in it than Jamie does.
Well,
not
just
that that'd be
I'm
hard.
Wearing a baggy shirt, and they come in all sizes.
Yeah, and you get that at tiny.cc/merch-ACA for T-shirts, mugs, hoodies, and even our limited edition T-shirts. We have T-shirts that are only around for a month or two. And then you'll never see them again. So keep checking back and see if you find one you like. And then right below chat, you'll notice there's a Donate Now box. Donations made there mean that the ACA will get 100% of the proceeds. YouTube doesn't take a cut, and that is the best way to support us. And finally, last but not least, the folks who actually make this possible, who make it possible so that Jamie and I can just sit here and bump our gums and they do all the real work. We have the fun. I guess they find what they do fun or they wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Anyway, that is our wonderful crew. There they are, working hard.
Yeah. The people that get as much out of making this possible as we get out of being in the spotlight. Yep. Crew.
There is one crew member that we forget about every week because he's never on TV. He's not back there in the magic room where all that happens. He's Justin. He's the guy who answers our email. And let me tell you, as someone who has answered our email, that is also a yeoman's job. That is some work dealing with. Oh, how should we put this politely? The lunatics, the haters, the people who decide to hide behind a keyboard and launch vicious attacks against the ACA, against us as hosts. Justin does all of that, and he took a particularly nasty email that was meant for me and did a really good job of responding, but guys, it's
and
just...
Thank you to thank you to Justin. I was going to say, for a little while, there was a way for people to call outside of show hours and leave messages.
Yeah, we don't do that anymore.
Yeah, no, we don't do that anymore. But my sense of fun and frivolity about the world allowed me to enjoy that somewhat. If you're aggressively mispronouncing someone's name because you've heard them talk everywhere and you've read everything about them, etc., it's like, okay, you've heard this person introduce themselves how many times? And you're like, yeah. There's a Y on the end of that name. You can see it. Anyway, I didn't know if you had more announcements to announce.
No,
or whether we should.
That's I think the last bit of announcements we got.
We got.
You know what? We do have. If you guys have been wondering what's been going on around the ACA, here's a little clip.
Be aware that poly people aren't necessarily about the sex. Yeah, a lot of us are, but we're not necessarily
Which is valid.
About
sex is nice. I like sex.
So
for
good.
goodness sakes.
We're just two dudes on the internet, and anything that we've said today is just the opinion of two dudes of the internet, not two physicians or two professional philosophers or two anything really. I mean, just call-in show hosts, which is the lowest credibility on the credibility ladder.
We can't prove we're not XXX in this situation, living in a simulation. We can't prove that a deity does not exist. That doesn't mean that I go around bathing in Pascal's wager going, oh look, I can't prove it doesn't exist.
That's a dingleberry. You know what a dingleberry is, right? Tell you what, go to Urban Dictionary after this program is done, and then come back to me, and you see what happens. Okay?
Should I use my work computer?
Yeah, definitely.
Sounds like you want to talk about morality and how it does not apply to God because he's the ultimate being.
Hello, I even have biblical evidence for this.
Oh, that's gonna mean a lot to us. Oh man, yeah. Ben, did you hear this? He has biblical evidence. Get ready to be pummeled into submission.
All right. And I think we'll take one more caller because no one's yelling at us in our ear.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll take calls until they stop. In the same way that I'll talk sometimes until someone stops me.
Really? We've never noticed that. All right, here we go. Michael in Florida. He says, you want to give a description of what God is. Give us your description.
What's God?
What is God? Okay, so theologically speaking, God does not have a beginning nor an end. In other words, he wasn't born. He cannot die. God is spiritual. He is a spirit, meaning that he doesn't have physical body parts like hands, feet, although we use that type of language to form some type of concept about him.
So I
hate
to jump in and interrupt already. I just want to clarify. So my brain just went, probably Christian, because I thought I saw that note. When you say God wasn't born, are you talking about Jesus as well? Or is that not part of...
No. Jesus was born.
Okay. And Jesus was God.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I was...
Yes, because of the circumstances of that particular birth.
Right. So when you say that God has no beginning or end, can you demonstrate that that's a thing that can happen?
No, not physically. I can't.
Then how do we know that's true? How do we know it's true?
Does the universe have a beginning and an end?
The universe has a beginning. I think. I assume that to be. I assume that to be true based on the universe, based on the idea of the universe being a created thing by God.
Okay. Well, we actually have evidence. You can go back to Big Bang Theory. Is the current best explanation for how the universe came about for as far back as we can do the math and we understand the physics. So we have evidence for that, but you don't have evidence for a God or something that can have no beginning and no end. And we have multiple versions of how the universe could end. They're all hypothetical. We don't know enough to know exactly which of them are going to happen. But here you are making a claim about a being saying that he has no beginning or end, and yet nothing in nature seems to, that we were aware of, seems to have that. I mean, we have some hypotheses about the universe, the cosmos not having a beginning or an end, but I mean, that's hypotheses at best. So what evidence do you have for a being that can have no beginning or end?
Well, in terms of science, it does not conclude that. But
then how do you conclude?
But the information, based on the teachings, based on the teachings of the Puritans, based on the teachings of the Puritans, more specifically, the 1689 Baptist Westminster Confession of Faith.
Okay, why should I take that as? Why should I take something done in 1689 when our understanding of science was significantly less than it is today? Why should I take that as evidence for anything other than they made a bunch of statements about what they believe?
Well, because it wasn't based upon scientific. Because it isn't based upon scientific. Scientific observation. No, it's based upon these people viewing, of course, history as well as also theology. That's why they use terms, whatever, such as doctrines of grace, salvation.
But how do you know they're right?
Yeah.
How do you demonstrate that those statements are correct and true?
Well, it's the best explanation that I can think of.
Okay, so
not so much, it's not so much that I can definitively say this is 100% correct and and convince other people of that. Why? Because you have to see the value in what it is that they wrote and whatnot. So I believe that's up to the individual.
But, so the Catholics,
how did they come to that conclusion? So one of the things that particularly on the show and in general we're interested in is, how did they figure that out? And it sounds kind of like what you're saying is, well, they've studied stuff in the Christian tradition and come to a conclusion about stuff about God and said it that wasn't said in 1688, and now in 1670 it's been said just because of 1689. But what made them conclude that, and should we believe that as well?
Well, I think that in terms of them coming to those conclusions, it's based upon a lot of it is based on them, thinking about the information that is presented, asking hard questions concerning that information, and and obviously discussing it, amongst each other, coming together in agreement.
But so the Catholics, right? The Catholics have the profession of faith, and I haven't compared the two. So just hypothetically, if the Catholic profession of faith and this confession of faith disagree on something or say something that is completely the opposite of each other, how do you go about determining which one is true? Because the Catholics have also been thinking about this for a really long time and have also been discussing it for a really long time. So they've gone through the same process that you say the Baptists have gone through. So how do I go about proving who's right if the confession of faith and the profession of faith of the Catholics disagree on something?
Well, personally, I don't really know how you would go about proving that, other than of course researching the information, see where they got their sources from, who influenced them at the time, what were their inspirations, who did they look to, for answers and things like that. Pretty much research, research and making your own observations, and
theologists have been doing this. And people have been doing this for 2,000 years, and we've ended up with 1,000 different denominations, all of which disagree on fundamental points. So, and they all do the same thing that you just mentioned, right? They do research and they go back and they read the Bible and they reread the Bible and they read other people's commentaries on the Bible. They do everything you just said. And we still have one single piece of evidence with 1,000 different interpretations. So how do you reconcile any of that?
Now I will say this, because of the multiplicity of sciences, archaeology, biology, chemistry, and the different tools that have been used, in order to test this, you can always get a different perspective concerning, what the Bible says. For example,
that's the problem he's bringing up is there's one piece of evidence and 1,000 different interpretations of it, right? Like if I see a bullet in a person, there's really only, there's one common, I would just go with an explanation, which is it was fired out of a gun into this person. But if I find something and there's, with the limited one piece of evidence, much less like it's a claim that these things happened, and there's 1,000 different ways of interpreting what it means, well, sure, I can go with one, but I don't have a good reason to choose between them. And that's the problem that Jim is bringing up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, the point that I was making is the idea of there being multiple sources coming from a different perspective. How do you explain the Bible from an archaeological perspective? What can archaeology verify concerning?
And there's lots of things where people go back and find
archaeology verifies quite a bit, right? Archaeology verifies some of the kingdoms and kings actually existed.
Jericho exists, but it doesn't.
But archaeology also shows that your point of Jericho, that the story of Jericho could not have happened at the time that the story of Jericho says it did, because Jericho wasn't a city at that point; it was a ruin, and it's gone through several iterations. So archaeology shows quite clearly that the Israelites were Canaanites, that they are a small sect of Canaanites. Archaeology also shows quite clearly that they were never in Egypt in the numbers that the Bible claimed. And again, this goes back to my original question. We have 1,000 different denominations looking at the same piece of evidence, coming up with 1,000 different claims to that, none of which agree. How do you get to your conclusion?
When you say how do I get to my conclusion, are you asking how do I prove that my conclusion is right?
Mm-hmm. Or what reason do you have to believe that it's right? Well, maybe you don't have definitive proof, but the murderer's gun went convenient. What reasons do you have for us to go, oh, this interpretation is the one that we should take seriously?
Well, I personally don't believe in that. I personally don't believe necessarily in absolute certainty. So whatever steps I take in order to actually get to, that conclusion. For example, one of the things that I'll do, I'll read books. I'll look at different videos, instructional videos like lectures, and to hear to hear the information. But basically, I'll basically go through that information. But like I said,
but how are you? What are you doing different than everybody is currently doing and has done in the past to come to different conclusions? What are you doing differently? Because they all use the exact same methodology to come to their very different conclusions. So what are you going to do different?
Well, as of right now, I'm not doing anything differently other than what has already been established.
Right.
But I would say, but I would say if I wanted to do something differently, I can go back to school for, to study this stuff. You know what I'm saying? To take a class and actually.
Yeah. And do you know what kind of degree you'd get? Because there are different degrees in theology you can get, some of which are more useful than others.
Well,
Or even if you didn't go
Well,
for a degree and just went
yeah.
for classes. So my question is, you said that there's aspects of this that you don't believe. What do you believe that's sort of like the Earth is 10,000 years old, or like just in a metaphor? Because I'm not sure what we're talking about in terms of evidence. I mean, other than why should we take the Bible seriously? Why should we take this particular interpretation of the Bible as gospel? What are we looking at here in terms of persuasive evidence, and what do you find that's persuasive evidence about this?
Well, my faith in God, you know, and even more specific, you know, or even more specifically, you know, based upon the Word, isn't just based upon whether or not this sounds like a good idea or a reasonable explanation. You know, it's also based on me attempting to live out what the Word of God says.
Okay, so it's
So you're
part
just
of a
trying to be
way
a
of
good
life
person.
as
You know-
well. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Jamie and I are both good people, and neither one of us believe in God, nor do we think it's
hey,
necessary.
speak for yourself. No,
Yeah.
yeah, we're both good people.
Yeah, we try to be good people anyway. We're not always successful. But anyway,
And kudos for you, but I'm not sure about the particular interpretation of baptism. We're not sure about that particular text or even the Christian creation, because I'm going to just flip the beginnings of those words nonsensically. The Christian tradition or any of that. So we can be good people and not believe in Jesus.
Right.
And if you guys don't mind, one thing that I would like to point out, you know, is which is a Bible verse, you know, how the Bible says in Timothy that the Scripture, of course, being inspired by God, given by inspiration of God, it is profitable for four things: doctrine, reproof, correction, and instruction in righteousness.
So here's kind of the problem I have with you quoting scripture. We just don't care. The book is either 66 books or 72 books that were curated and edited by human beings for the purpose of theology and nothing else. It wasn't history. It was simply theology. So of course it's going to say things like that. It doesn't mean it's true. And a lot of the principles that you see in Christianity, you know, we can trace back to Stoicism and other philosophies that predate Christianity, that were in the air at the time. So that's not really a surprise. However, we do have to go. We are running 20 minutes over time because nobody yelled at us, and now they are. But this has been a great conversation, Michael, and I hope you call back again soon because we'd love to continue this at some point.
Yeah, we don't disagree about being a good person, but when you say it's useful for these four things and your first thing is doctrine, nope. But if you say correction, we can talk about whether or not it's right for this, that, or the other that the Bible says about beating your kid and any other number of things. Yeah. But I can get that same value from the Quran, which also says that it's the inerrant word of God.
So anyway, some things to think about. And again, we hope you you call back soon. All right?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Michael. Bye. And
they finally
they finally yelled at us, folks. We're sorry. I don't know how many want us to keep going, but we did. They don't. That's fine. The people we're talking to, by the way, are these wonderful folks in the audience. There they are. Wave, make some noise. We can't hear you. There we go. Thank you guys so much for being out here on a Sunday and spending your Sunday afternoon with us. We really do appreciate it more than you know, especially those of you who are live, because it does make it so much better to do the show. I'm not talking to a wall. I'm talking to real people out there.
A community.
It is a community, and we do have a community here at the Atheist Community of Austin. I hope that if you're an atheist, you also have found your community, even if it's not a bunch of atheists, even if you just go bowling with some folks you really like, just as long as you've got some sort of community out there. And that will bring us to, I believe, what we call the closing credits. Uh-oh.
Boom.
What will it take for you to start opening your eyes, to start questioning the bullshit everyone around you buys? You think it's any of your business what goes on between my thighs? I wonder
Have you ever wanted to be a host on an ACA show or be the one calling the shots behind the scenes? Are you in Austin, Texas, or at least Austin adjacent? Well, on Saturday, February 25th, make your way down to the Freethought Library because we'll be holding open auditions for show hosts and orientations for prospective crew members. For those wanting to be hosts, you'll be able to sit in the studio where our shows are broadcast and we'll put you through your paces to see if you can be one of the new personalities of the ACA. For future crew members, you'll get hands-on experience using the equipment used for broadcast and will help us record the host auditions. If you've ever dreamed of being part of the ACA productions, then this is your chance to show us what you've got. This event is free. For more information and registration, visit tiny.cc/ACA auditions.